Hello and welcome to the Fit News Podcast. I am your host, Jen Shaver. Now, listen, ladies, if your grocery shopping is overwhelming and you are ready to revamp your cart, I have a fat loss grocery list that's free just for you. Support your weight loss goals so you can stay on track and make shopping easier with the fat loss grocery list. Head to workwithjenshaver.com to grab that list today. Now, my guest today is a 3-time cancer survivor. Gretchen Holmes is a dynamic speaker and host of the Work in Between podcast, where she and guests take a deep dive into the struggles, joys, and daily actions that move us towards physical, emotional, and spiritual health. Diagnosed with diabetes in 2021, Gretchen transformed her life by losing 110 pounds and continues to focus on daily work necessary to maintain a vibrant, healthy lifestyle. Previously, Gretchen worked as a stand-up comedian and continues to use humor to navigate the complexities of life. She was also co-creator, co-producer, writer, and on-air talent for WUMR's Let's Talk Health, and was named as one of the 100 successful women to know on the Gulf Coast in 2022 by Gulf Coast Women magazine. Gretchen has now also recently added author to her credentials as she has released her new book, The Work in Between, which recently was ranked #1 new release in thyroid conditions category on Amazon, and it is quickly working its way to bestseller. Now, some of you might remember that Gretchen was on the podcast before, so welcome back, Gretchen. I am excited to chat with you about this new venture of yours, and congratulations on the book.
Thank you, Jen. I am so excited to come back and talk with you about it. I mean, I didn't know this was a dream, but it certainly became one. And now that it came to fruition, I am so excited to share that with everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. So, in the bio, and the first time that we chatted, we spent some time talking about your 110-pound weight loss. Now, that was in 2021, correct?
I was diagnosed with diabetes in 2021. So
Okay.
I started my journey and lost over 100 pounds.
Okay. And it is now 2024.
Yeah.
And you have maintained that loss. And that is something that really needs to be celebrated.
Yeah. Yeah. It was when I was talking with you that we talked about the cards being stacked against me when I went on the weight loss journey, because I was in my late 50s. I had just come off endometrial cancer and had a radical hysterectomy. I had no thyroid because of thyroid cancer. I was very sedentary, which I must say I probably still am. But I lost all that weight, and I thought, we were talking about how that was pretty remarkable. And then we started talking about keeping it off.
Yeah.
And I thought, holy smokes, that's probably going to be harder than losing it. And I don't know that it's harder. It's just different. But I have maintained it. I do fluctuate, I don't know, 5 to 8 pounds.
Which is normal.
I'm fine with it. But yes, I'm still healthy and feeling great.
And, so before we move on to the book, I want to talk about that, because #1, to maintain that type of weight loss is absolutely incredible and should be celebrated. But #2, there have to be some things, systems, if you will, that you have in place that have helped you to maintain this lifestyle. Yeah. Could you share what maybe some of those are that might be helpful?
Sure. Yeah. So what I realized about halfway through my weight loss journey, I read Atomic Habits, which is, by James Clear. If you haven't read it, you have to, because it takes this whole idea of motivation and willpower out of the equation.
Exactly. Which is where we all need to start. Because
absolutely. Yeah. And so what he talked about, of course, was taking very small habits and incorporating those, because long-term they have very big effects.
Right.
And it's true, because in the example I always share with people is, look, if you eat a donut one day, it's not going to have any major effects.
Right.
But if you eat a donut every day, in a month, it's going to have an effect.
Right.
Right. Same thing with your habits. You can start very small habits and you wake up the next day and go, well, nothing's changed. But in a month it will.
Right.
And it's those small habits that we have a tendency to be able to maintain. So the things that I found that worked really well for me, one is I take my lunch every day, no matter what.
Right.
I prepare it the night before. I do it right after dinner as I'm putting, doing dishes and putting leftovers away. I have my lunch ready to go. And that has been a huge factor in keeping me on track, because the options outside of my control are so great.
Right.
And so that's been a huge factor. The other factor is I always have really good tasting, healthy sides that I can add to any protein. So I roast off veggies and I make sure that I have plenty to choose from. I have frozen bags of vegetables in the freezer, and that makes it super easy. And my husband, he's super supportive. He will either grill or I will, but he likes to smoke stuff. So he will smoke me a turkey breast or chicken breasts or whatever. I always have healthy protein to make dinners. And breakfast, well, that's in my control too. So those couple of things have allowed me to maintain this, because it doesn't matter whether I'm motivated that day, whether I feel great or I feel awful. I have those things in place, and I don't have to work at deciding how to eat. And that has helped me immensely. I mean, it really has. It sounds silly, but it's true.
Right. And, again, like you mentioned, small habits.
Yeah.
Control what you can and plan ahead.
Yeah. That's what I've done. And I did, because I was on Weight Watchers, I had to learn what a portion was. It was way less than I thought it was.
I think that holds true for many of us. And, really, when you look at portion sizes, there's a, I don't know if you want to call it a meme or whatever, that I have seen, that shows what a meal at McDonald's was in 1980s versus what a meal at McDonald's is in today's world. And it's more than doubled.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So it's crazy.
So, it's relearning what a portion really is, right? Is important. Yeah.
Well, it is. And here's what I also started getting my head around, which is, all right, look, start with what the portion is, whatever the amount is, even if I'm eating chips or whatever it is.
Right.
So if the serving is 24 or whatever, so eat 24. And if you decide you still want more, well, then get up and go get them. But don't sit down with a whole bag.
Yeah.
Because I've always thought one bag equaled one serving. It didn't matter what size of the bag.
Right.
But I have learned that, a half a cup of ice cream is enough for me. I don't need 3 times that amount.
Right.
But who knew? Because I just automatically ate oversized servings of everything. And I realized that, a small amount of something often is all I want.
Right.
And I didn't know that either. I had never really thought about it. And so now I tend to eat whatever the serving size is. And then if I want more, then it's a conscious decision.
Right.
And that is intentional. And that's different than just mindlessly eating, which is what I had a tendency to do.
Right. And, another important thing that you mentioned, that also makes it so that this is actually sustainable, because you're not restricting. You're not saying, no, you can't have this.
No.
We're just having a portion size. We're having, and I think that's important to understand, so, that makes this something that isn't just for a short term. This is long term, and that helps it so you don't feel like only 28 more days and I get to have this, or, whatever the quote unquote challenge is.
That mattered a lot to me.
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure, and I was very intentional about this. I love to cook, that helps, but I wasn't going to eat anything that I didn't like, that didn't taste good, that wasn't relatively healthy for me. I wanted to make sure whatever I ate was something that I would be excited about eating tomorrow and next month or whatever. So I practiced with all sorts of different seasonings and ways to cook things. And I have absolutely my favorite things, and I eat them all the time. What has happened is my taste buds have changed. People think they don't, but amazing? They do.
Yeah.
And the stuff that I get really excited about are vegetables that I roast with, a little balsamic vinegar, or I make salads every day, and I have certain combinations that I sincerely look forward to eating my lunch every day because it's delicious.
Right.
And so I only eat food I really, really like. And that means that I look forward to every meal because it's good and delicious and nutritious and healthy.
Well, and that's so important, because if we're getting our quote unquote meal plan out of the grocery store magazine, right?
Yeah.
That says eat this, this, and this, and you do that for 2 weeks, and you're like, oh, I've lost all this weight. Okay, well, did you like eating that? Are you going to eat that forever? You might have hated it. So how sustainable really is that? So it's important to find the foods, like you said, that you truly enjoy, because that's the only way that it's going to, work for you personally. And that's really what we're, going for.
Yeah, I've been, I started my weight loss journey 3.5 years ago, and I keep changing up what I eat. It's, sometimes I go back to eating stuff that I really liked a year ago or 2 years ago. And some things have kind of dropped off my radar because I'm like, I don't really like that anymore. So then I find new things. And so I am still very experimental. I'm very adventurous. I happen to kind of be a foodie. So I am not a picky eater at all. But there are things I just don't like, and so I don't eat them. I don't care how healthy they are.
Yeah,
I don't like them.
Right.
So I'm not going to eat them.
And that's just it. I hate green beans, so I'm not eating them.
Yeah, there you go.
I don't even make them. My kids love them. And I guess you buy them and make them, but I'm not making them because I'm not eating them.
I don't do kale. I don't like kale. I don't get kale, but I eat everything else. Yeah. So no, I think that we get so caught up in the losing of the weight.
Yes.
That we forget about creating something that is good for us and that is delicious and is something that we think we can do day in and day out. If somebody it has to be, and lifestyle. So that is so cliche, but I didn't really get it until I realized that I didn't want to do this again. I didn't want to have to lose weight again. It's a lot of pressure and it's emotional. And so I thought, well, you've been playing with this now for over 40 years, right? I was always morbidly obese or obese growing up. Same thing in my adult years. I'd lost 100 pounds once, gained it all back. Then I'd lost 40, 50, 60 pounds. I don't know how many times, always gained it back. And I thought, enough. Yeah. Just enough. And I thought, I'm smart enough to figure this out. Why is this so hard? And then I realized that any of the external changes we want to make is all on the inside. Yeah. Right. It's all the internal stuff we got to work on Because if you take care of the internal stuff, healing traumas, looking at how you talk to yourself, your relationship with food, if you start to address those things, the external takes care of itself.
Right. Right.
And it did.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the byproduct.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's dig a little deeper into your book and what is in this book, and how did you come to get started on writing it?
That's a good question. So, I started my podcast a couple of years ago. We're just finishing season 2, and I've had a wonderful time with the podcast, looking forward to season 3.
Yeah.
What's funny about the book is that when I first started writing my thoughts down, because people were asking me, do you have a book? I looked for you on Amazon. I don't see a book. And I'm like, well, no, I don't have a book. I've been published as a researcher. I'm a social scientist, so I've published in peer-reviewed journals, but I certainly never written a book. And so people kept asking, and I thought, well, maybe I could write a book. I never thought I wanted to write a book, but maybe I can write a book. Yeah. So when I started putting thoughts down on paper, the intention was this was going to be a book about weight loss. Yeah. This was going to be a book about how I lost 110 pounds and now I love shopping and all my problems have been solved, which is not even true at all. But the book ended up not being about that. I mean, there's a part of it at the end, but the book ended up being more about my internal transformational journey. Mm-hmm. And so it starts with one of my 3 cancer diagnoses. And then I go back to childhood because that's kind of where everything starts. And I talk very openly, very honestly, very transparently about growing up in an alcoholic home. My dad was an active drinker and I was the middle child, the only girl. My older brother was a hemophiliac, so he was in the hospital a lot. Oh, wow. And my younger brother had gotten hit by a truck when he was 8. He was on a bicycle, so we almost lost him. My poor mom had very little bandwidth left for me because there was nothing wrong with me. I didn't have any life or death things going on. I just felt kind of invisible. But but clearly how we grow up has a big influence on how we see ourselves and how we talk to ourselves. And I realized through therapy and working with a transformational coach that I self-soothed with food. Wow. Well, of course I did. Yeah. There was nothing but uncertainty. I mean, there was lots of love. That wasn't the problem. Right. But there was a lot of chaos. There was a lot of disruption. There was a lot of yelling, a lot of crying because I cried a lot. And there was a lot of fear. Yeah. Right. I mean, we were afraid if Dad was going to come home because he usually was drunk, or there was a fear he wasn't going to come home. Yeah. And even though when he was gone, it was quieter, it was more fun, there was no stress. Yeah. I always still worried. Right. And so nobody can be that sad, that scared, that upset constantly. And so you come up with strategies to make you feel better. Yeah. And food was my strategy. And that's what I did. So I grew up self-soothing with food. And that's really where I kind of get started in the book, is being very clear about where these behaviors started. But it was really important to me to accept the responsibility as I got older to do something about that. Because even though that's kind of where I started, that doesn't mean that's where I had to end. And I just refused to take on that victim mentality, because my mom had told me from a very young age, look, bad things happen to everybody. Good things happen to everybody too, but bad things happen to everybody. You don't have to build a mountain to it. Wow. And And I don't think I knew how much I owned that until I was writing my book. And I realized that was kind of my guiding principle as I was going through life. I mean, it was still impacting me a lot, but I didn't blame my childhood on every decision I made as an adult.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
but I had to go back and deal with some of that stuff.
Right.
And that's what I did. And so that's what the book is about. So it talks about my cancer journeys, and it talks about my relationships, and it talks about being obese or morbidly obese most of my life and all the challenges that go with that, including within the healthcare environment, which is not particularly friendly to people who have weight issues. And so I hope what people get out of my book is hope and inspiration, and feel empowered to start their own journeys, because how we talk to ourselves about ourselves matters. And I think ultimately the book is just my journey toward self-acceptance and self-love and worthiness, and embracing myself as somebody who deserves all sorts of great, wonderful things, just like everybody else does.
Right. Right. And, I think you mentioned the self-soothing with food. I think that many will find that to be something very relatable. Now, they might not be understanding that connection yet. They might not be at the point where they make that connection yet. But hopefully by either hearing this or reading your book, they're able to put those things together, because I think once they do that, then they can take those next important steps.
I hope so. I think telling our stories is really important, because that's how we hold a mirror up to ourselves and other people, and when we can relate to things, then we start to think about things, and we go, yeah, I did that too. I didn't even know that's what that was. I was having a conversation with some folks who were on my podcast, and it was then I realized I was a food addict. I mean, we're talking recently, right? Probably 6 months ago. And I had to add that to the book, because I thought, wow, there's an epiphany. And I thought, I did keep doing a behavior that brought me negative consequences. And even though I knew it kept bringing me negative consequences, I kept doing it. I'm a food addict.
Yeah.
I'm addicted to sugar, so I knew that. But once I was able to label things, it changes it. Then you can talk about it in a way that you can, come up with strategies, and you can do things.
Address it.
Yeah, you can do stuff that mitigates it. But if we don't know what it is, if we're in denial about it, or we can't label it, well, then we don't even know what we're supposed to do. So that was really very freeing for me. Some people would be embarrassed about that. I'm not.
Yeah.
I owned it. I'm good with it.
Well, and I think the important thing there is that, this is long after your weight loss. And again, this was after you started writing this book.
Yep.
Which means that the journey doesn't end. The learning and the journey do not end ever.
I hope not.
And, if we want to continue, having forward progress, we have to be open to learning new things, and also, learning new things about ourselves and why we do the things that we do, and having those honest conversations with ourselves.
Yeah. And I think some of us are probably a little more introspective than others. I know folks, when I've talked with them, I say, boy, that meeting didn't go very well. I need to really take a look at what my role in that was and what I could do better. And they would say, why? Just move on. I'm not saying one way is better than the other. I tend to overthink. Yeah. That doesn't help either. So there are pros and cons to all of this. But for me, I've always been somebody who wants to understand why I do what I do.
Yeah.
And I think that writing, I tell you what, if you really want to do some real introspection, write a book, because it forces you to make connections with things that you maybe not weren't ready to make those connections. And that happened for me, but it's been very healthy for me. Even if it came up with some negative things, I was okay with that. That's kind of what I was digging around for. But I also came up with some really good things that I had forgotten about, or that I forgot, that I just neglected to ever give myself credit for, which is tends to be the way I operate, which is if I've achieved it, I've done it, it's no big deal. And I don't know where I got that from. But if I fail ever so slightly or screw up, well, then it's a huge deal. And I thought, well, that's not a good way to live. You can't, that's not fair. You wouldn't do that to somebody you care about. So I had to start treating myself better.
Yeah. Yeah. And you said something in the very beginning that was very interesting. And I want to just kind of look at it a little more. Weight loss, you were talking about weight loss and solving all problems, right?
Yeah.
And most people think that, oh, if I just lose this weight, all my problems will be solved, right? But that's not it.
No, because my weight wasn't the problem.
Right.
Now, I was unhealthy and I was on medications.
Exactly.
From a physical standpoint, it was a problem. From a health standpoint.
Right.
From me living my life standpoint, the problem was not my weight. My weight was a symptom. What my problem was that I didn't value myself. I realized as I was writing the book that over the course of my life, I am a helper.
Yeah.
I'm incredibly generous. I love helping people. I love supporting people. I realized, and this was a hard realization, it was embarrassing, but I realized that I put way more effort and energy into helping other people achieve their dreams than I put into my own. And I thought, how sad is that? And so I had to flip that and say, you can certainly support people and help them and do what you do, but not at the expense of you achieving your dreams. And if that means you've got to sit back and seriously think about what your dreams are because you haven't had that conversation with yourself, well, then now is a great time to do that, because I just never thought my dreams were that important. And so I wasn't going to put as much effort into them. But neither was I going to ask anyone else to help support my dreams, even though I would go out of my way to help other people. And I thought, well, no, that we're going to stop that. And I did. And now not only am I doing stuff to support my dreams, I'm getting really good at asking people to help me do it.
Yeah. Good.
That's huge for me. That's a complete shift.
Right. And I think that, I think that many women relate to that as well, right? Most of us are helpers and most of us don't want to ask for help. No,
because we don't think we deserve it quite often. And that's not true. Everybody, my life is not any more important than anyone else's, but neither is anyone else's life more important than mine. We're all important. That's great, but we shouldn't constantly have to feel obligated to put our dreams, our desires on the back burner because everybody's just used to us helping all the time and being there, and we don't ask anything of anybody else.
Yeah.
Well, that's not fair either. So for me, I kind of had to even out the playing field a little bit.
Yeah. Gretchen, if people want to find this book, where can they find your book?
Okay, so I have to show it. I look better. It's a beautiful picture. Truly. It's on Amazon.com, of course. It's both Kindle and paperback. It's on Barnes and Noble. .com. You can go to my website, which is GretchenHolmesPhD.com. You can order it there.
Okay.
Or you could go to my publishing company, which is Page and Podium Press, and you can order bulk orders there. So if you want to buy 20 copies for your book club, you can buy it at a discounted rate and go through them. So it's kind of everywhere.
Great. Well, congratulations, Gretchen. We appreciate your time and coming to share all about your book, The Work in Between.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on, Jen. You know, I love your work and what you do. And it's just always an honor to get to sit and talk with you.
Yeah, likewise.
Thanks.
Well, thank you for listening to the Fit News podcast, and we will catch you next time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Fit News Podcast. I'm your host, Jen Shaver, and I'm on a continuing mission to help you stay strong, healthy, and happy. A special thank you to our producer, Noah Martin, and Retrospection Multimedia. Tune in to the Fit News Podcast every Monday to get your tips for living your best midlife. These episodes are live streamed weekly in our Facebook group. Be sure to comment, like, and subscribe to Fit News Podcast for your weekly health advice. To join the Facebook group, visit strongforlifefitness.com.